some alien race to come down and threaten us.
Is the singularity near?
The truth is out there.
The military-industrial complex.
The 7 mountains of the influencers of culture.
To be as gods, you know.
Change has come to America.
Catapult of propaganda.
From a secure location on top of the ridge in the heart of the beautiful Missouri Ozarks, this is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
Oh, once again, from the frozen Missouri Ozarks, the coyotes are howling, the dachshund is snoring, and that means it's time for A View from the Bunker Live. Tonight, it's a Green New Deal with free money for everybody. Yay! Everybody's mad at Virginia's governor, but for the wrong reason. Hey, did you hear the one about the Pope and the Imam? It's not really funny. And neither is the stories coming out of the Southern Baptist Convention. We'll talk about a new investigative piece by the Houston Chronicle. Disturbing. And we'll wrap up tonight with a story about how Mary Poppins is racist. Yes. Our guest tonight, the interview segment from the streets of Los Angeles to full-time ministry, Mando de la Vega, joins us tonight. This is February 10th. 2019, A View from the Bunker Live. I'm Derek Gilbert. Thank you for joining us tonight. Wherever you happen to be listening, we appreciate you letting us inside your ear holes, whether it's at Spreaker.com. And, of course, if you're there, you can weigh in through the chat room. Of course, you can also listen at iHeartRadio, Stitcher.com, Spotify.com, or at the website, vftb.net. There's a little player there in the right-hand column that broadcasts this live as we go live each Sunday evening at 7 p.m. Central Time. That is UTC minus 6. At least until we get back to daylight savings, but we'll deal with that then. You can also subscribe to the podcast. If you're listening in the archives, we appreciate you doing that as well. You can subscribe through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, at Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or directly at vftb.net. Of course, the easy way to do it, download the free mobile app. We've got a free app. Downloads these programs straight to your smartphone or tablet at the iTunes App Store and at Google Play. And we've got links to both of those at the website, which is vftb.net. If you like YouTube and prefer to just listen through YouTube, you can do that. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/Derek Gilbert. The benefit there is that you also get access to the weekly Bible study that Sharon and I produce, the Gilbert House Fellowship. We also upload the audio from that to YouTube, so you can get that there as well. On social media, facebook.com/View from the Bunker, Twitter, View from Bunker, or at Derek Gilbert, either way. And we've got a couple of new options for social media, because the only way we're going to get past the gatekeepers in social media is if we quit using their gates, right? Oneway.com. Oneway.com, at Derek P. Gilbert at oneway.com, which is sort of a Facebook alternative. The interface very much like Facebook. And a brand new one, just trying out this week. Learned about this from Vox Day, very intelligent young man who I've been following for quite some time. He's former columnist for WorldNet Daily, and an author who's written some great Christian fiction. But a new social media outlet that will be a Twitter replacement. The interface very much like Twitter, and this is in partnership with oneway.com. Promises free speech, but moderated to keep things clean. There was another option out there that I tried for a while called Gab, and Gab just, they said, we're not going to moderate anything, and sadly it devolved into a cesspool of filth, to be quite frank. So, Social Galactic is the new one. This is called Social Galactic. You'll find it online, socialgalactic.com. Sharon and I have both set up profiles there. So, socialgalactic.com if you want a Twitter alternative. At Derek P. Gilbert is my username over there, and we hope you'll join us. So, what's going on this week? Well, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who has gotten an awful lot of press. She is really the media's darling right now, but you just have to wonder how long this is going to last. On Thursday of this week, she and Senator Ed Markey, Democrat from Massachusetts, released a blueprint for what they call the Green New Deal. This is something she's been running on for quite some time. This calls for a 10-year national mobilization of American resources, sort of a space project or Manhattan project to get America off of non-renewable energy sources. Get us away from fossil fuel. It also calls for national health care coverage and job guarantees for everybody, unless you don't want to work. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But this is something that is, I think, President Trump very quickly identified, and correctly, as a way to kind of flush out where Democrats stand on this issue. Because I think this is going to divide the Democratic Party as much as it will divide the American people, if not more so. Some of the Democratic candidates for president have already come out in favor of at least the concept of a Green New Deal. Senators Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, Kirsten Gillibrand, and Kamala Harris already endorsing the concept of a Green New Deal. Now, look, as a conservative, and I don't identify with a particular political party, only insofar as that party represents my views, but it's becoming clearer and clearer that we're really not being given much of a choice anymore out here as conservatives, true conservatives. I'm in favor of protecting the environment. I want future generations to enjoy the natural beauty that exists in this world. We are blessed to be able to see quite a bit of it out of our back windows here, living in the Ozarks. The hills and the cattle out in the back. I mean, you don't get much better than that. Looking at our front window, the other side of the ridge here kind of drops off, so no one will build over there. So we've got basically woods, forest across the road from us. It's wonderful, and I don't want that destroyed. On the other hand, I recognize that moving away completely from fossil fuels is not something that is going to happen soon, and will certainly, I doubt, in my lifetime, in my daughter's lifetime, in fact, perhaps many generations from now, may still not be a reality just because they're abundant and they're cheap. Well, this Green New Deal proposal, in a nutshell, encourages a number of different things. Upgrading all existing buildings in the country for energy efficiency. Catch that wording. All existing buildings in the country. That is a huge undertaking in and of itself. A lot of the buildings existing in the country have not been built within the last 10 or 15 years to energy efficiency standards that they are hoping to achieve with this Green New Deal. Retrofitting some of these older buildings, especially older industrial buildings, that is really going to cost a lot. Some of these buildings are owned by people without much in the way of financial resources. Many of these buildings may be owned by nonprofit organizations, say churches, community organizations. Are you going to impose the cost on them? Or is this something that will be borne by the taxpayers, the wealthy, the 1%? Well, I think that's the assumption here. Another plank in this proposal, working with farmers to eliminate pollution and greenhouse gas emissions as much as technologically possible, while supporting family farms and promoting universal access to healthy food. Now, again, loopholes, words matter. Bear in mind, by the way, we should say up front that this Green New Deal that Senator Markey and Representative Ocasio-Cortez are putting forward is a non-binding resolution. There's no enforcement mechanism here. This is not legislation that would require the government to do anything. It's basically virtue signaling. But the president and Senator Lindsey Graham, God bless him, both calling for a vote. Hey, yeah, let's bring it to the floor. Let's vote on this. Let's put people on the record on where they stand, as to where they stand on these proposals. Because eliminating greenhouse gas emissions in the FAQ, and we'll talk about this FAQ and the talking points that were put out there by Ocasio-Cortez's staff and then quickly withdrawn when people began to read it, would have required getting rid of cattle, essentially, because cows fart, steers fart. And so getting rid of beef, just reduce our carbon footprint. It'll be great. Isn't it a good thing that the millions of bison that roamed the prairie back in the day, 150 years ago, that they didn't pass gas? Otherwise, we would all have burned up long, long ago. This Green New Deal also proposes overhauling transportation systems to reduce emissions, including expanding electric car manufacturing. Think about that, building charging stations everywhere and expanding high-speed rail to a scale where air travel stops becoming necessary. High-speed rail to a scale where air travel stops becoming necessary. Now, Think about this. The Speaker of the House, Democrat Nancy Pelosi, flies back to California pretty much every weekend. High-speed rail probably take, 18 or 20 hours to get from D.C. to San Francisco? Speaker Pelosi's going to go for this, do you think? I don't think so. And routing the trains across the mountains, that can be a little problematic. This just isn't going to happen. So air travel stops becoming, and that's not going to happen. And good luck if you live in Hawaii or Alaska. Again, this is pie in the sky stuff, but this is what's being proposed by the radical wing of the Democratic Party, which is ascendant at the moment. They also propose federal job guarantees. The federal government guaranteeing jobs with family-sustaining wages, adequate family and medical leave, paid vacations, and retirement security for every American. Well, again, in an ideal world, this would be great. Everybody who wants to work would work. But when you start doing things like this, guaranteeing a high-paying job for every American. Look, I'm sorry, there are a lot of us out here, self-included, who without the stress of knowing that you might not eat if you don't work, wouldn't work at all. And that brings us to the FAQ. The frequently asked questions, the answers to the frequently asked questions, the FAQ, posted by the staff of Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's staff on Thursday evening after this proposal was made public, included the promise that the Green New Deal would ensure economic security to those who were unable or unwilling to work. So, not only are we trying to eliminate beef cattle and air travel, unless presumably we can somehow invent battery-powered passenger airliners, providing economic security to those who are unwilling to work. Okay. This is what some economists call universal basic income. Finland, in fact, tried this about a year ago, and just this past week they announced that they were abandoning the experiment because you find that when you just pay people to do nothing, they do nothing. You can't run an economy that way. Human nature is such that when we are not under some stress, we tend not to do anything. An object at rest remains at rest. This is as true with humans as it is with objects in space. Well, once this went public and conservative commentators jumped on this rather vague proposal, it was pulled from Ocasio-Cortez's website, and then she sent forth her spokesman, one of her spokesmen, or advisor, I should say, Robert Hockett, who appeared on Fox News with Tucker Carlson Friday night. And he flat out lied and said that the people who were criticizing the proposal had just made it up. They were working from a hacked or doctored version of the document. Well, now they've had to backtrack from that and say, "Oh yeah, okay, we did the nose." Monty Python reference for you there. Yeah, okay, we did that. Instead of just admitting and saying, "Hey, look, we got a little enthusiastic. We're inexperienced. We're new at this. We made a mistake. We shouldn't have put this in the." Setting aside the fact that this idea is just fundamentally at odds with human nature to begin with, just setting that aside, just owning up to the mistake and saying, we didn't mean to put that in there. They tried to blame it on conservatives and then claimed that it had been hacked. It basically lied about it. The takeaway from all of this, first of all, setting aside the fact that the Green New Deal is going to be dead on arrival, because it would absolutely kill the economy. Representative Ocasio-Cortez and those who support her are either hopelessly naive, just incompetent, or dishonest. or some combination of all three. Now, she seems sincere. She seems sincere, but she is sincerely mistaken. Socialism doesn't work because it runs counter to basic human nature. Yes, capitalism has its flaws, but the flaws are not inherent in capitalism. The flaws are inherent in the human heart. It's called sin, dear. And socialism does not solve that problem. It makes it worse. It makes it worse because it gives us an incentive to not do anything. The system collapses on itself and just results in human misery. Capitalism ain't perfect, but it's still the best system going. Well, Virginia's Governor Ralph Northam has had a rough couple of weeks. He went on CBS this morning, today, Sunday. Gayle King conducted the interview with him. Softball interview, opening the interview by saying, "You've had a rough week. Where would you like to begin?" Can you imagine? Can you imagine Donald Trump getting that as an opening question from CBS, CNN, or most of the major media? Anyway, Ralph Northam, of course, you know that he's been accused of appearing in blackface some 35 years ago when he was a student in medical school. Picture in his yearbook came out, and 1984. He seems to have thought it was humorous, funny to appear in blackface, and this was raised after he conducted an interview on WTOP radio, which broadcast into Baltimore, Washington, D.C., and the Virginia suburbs, as a Meet the Governor segment. And during that interview, talking about a bill proposed by a delegate to the Virginia Assembly, Kathy Tran, Democrat, which would have allowed abortion, third-term abortion, right up to and even beyond, according to Governor Northam, beyond the moment at which the child was born. He defended in the interview having a child born, resuscitated if it's the mother's wish, and then she and the doctor can have a discussion about whether or not to, allow it to live, essentially is what he said. Please understand, it's post-delivery abortion, snuffing the child after it was born. And suddenly this came out of nowhere that, Governor Northam was, appeared in blackface 35 years ago. Now, isn't it curious that this appeared after that disaster of an interview on WTOP, but it didn't come out during the election campaign? An election campaign during which supporters of Northam ran an absolutely detestable television ad against the Republican candidate, Ed Gillespie, showing a pickup truck with a Gadsden flag, the Confederate flag, and a Gillespie bumper sticker on it, chasing children of color. As though this driver, this Confederate redneck Gillespie supporter, wanted to run over an African-American child, a Muslim child, a Latino child. Absolutely despicable. And the Republicans, presumably, somebody must have known about this old yearbook photo. In fact, a Fox News contributor said he received a copy of it last October, so it was floating around out there before the election. But the Republicans didn't bring it out. I'm wondering if the Democrats didn't float this blackface scandal out there to distract from the real issue here. See, because the problem in all of this, and Northam is still trying to defend it. And by the way, Northam, during the interview with Gayle King, it was absolutely, he clearly can't talk his way out of a paper bag. While explaining to Gayle King why he felt he should be allowed to continue and serve out the rest of his term, he referred to slaves who arrived in Virginia as indentured servants. Indentured servants. I have an ancestor who arrived in Virginia around 1622 as an indentured servant. He was English. And after 7 years, he was free. That's a little different from the situation of the Africans who were brought here as slaves in the 17th and 18th century. Governor Northam was in it. CBS gave him a softball interview, an opportunity for a softball interview, and he stepped in it even further. But the thing is, the people who are angry at Governor Ralph Northam are angry at him for the wrong reason. He went on a radio interview broadcast into our nation's capital in support of terminating a child after a live birth. So this whole blackface gate thing is a big distraction, I think, to keep attention off of what Northam said in that interview. And I think it's also why Democrats are freaking out over the health of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and why bills like the one introduced by Delegate Kathy Tran are being put forward and in some cases passed, as in the case of New York State, that even most pro-abortion Americans oppose. They are freaking out that notorious RBG will be replaced by a conservative justice who will overturn Roe v. Wade. And so they're moving now to pass bills that go beyond what Roe versus Wade now allows and what most Americans support. A recent poll by the Marist organization showed that 81% of all Americans and 66% of those who identify as pro-choice would restrict abortion to, at most, the first 3 months of pregnancy. But New York has now legalized it through the third trimester, through 9 months. Vermont is trying to do the same. The governor of Rhode Island is publicly supporting a similar bill. The bill in Virginia, proposed by Delegate Tran, has been tabled. But we're busy arguing over whether or not Ralph Northam wore blackface 35 years ago, when he was young and stupid. As all of us are. There are things I did in 1984 I don't want my mother to know about, much less the rest of the country. But the question is, who is Ralph Northam today? Who is Derek Gilbert today? That's what's important, not who we were 35 years ago when we were young and foolish. Let's remember that. Political roundup this week. Elizabeth Warren has officially announced her candidacy because she had to apologize again this past week to the Cherokee Nation for claiming to be an American Indian on her application to the Texas bar. Her candidacy is dead on arrival. Kirsten Gillibrand says that eliminating private health insurance is an urgent goal of the Democratic Party. And Kamala Harris also called for the same thing. She did this a couple of weeks ago. Said, let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on. Because, yeah, all of us have had issues with insurance companies, but boy, oh boy, putting it in the hands of the federal government, that'll just make it so much better, won't it? Amy Klobuchar, senator from Minnesota, officially announced her candidacy this weekend. Here's just a tip for your campaign, Senator Klobuchar. If you're going to make climate change a central point of your announcement, the announcement of your candidacy, don't do it outdoors in the middle of a blizzard. Because by the end of her speech, talking about climate change and how important it is we stop global warming now, she looked like a snowman or snow person. And interesting that while all of this is coming out, she's a 3-term senator. Most of us not really familiar with Amy Klobuchar, but several stories came out this week about the way she treats her staff. And frankly, made Hillary Clinton sound like, like Barbara Bush. I mean, not a good. In fact, reportedly, Senator Klobuchar has problems hiring staff because she is notorious for abusing the people who work for her. In fact, according to one story, Senator Harry Reid, then the Senate Majority Leader, had to call Senator Klobuchar into a closed-door meeting. This is about 4 years ago, to tell her to change the way she was dealing with her staff because it was getting embarrassing. So we'll see. I doubt Senator Klobuchar is going to go anywhere. Still looks like Kamala Harris is probably the front runner, at least until Joe Biden decides to run. We'll see. Cory Booker, the question being asked this week, is the country ready for a 50-year-old bachelor? We'll just leave that there. Willie Brown, who was the former San Francisco mayor and Speaker of the California State Assembly, writes a weekly column in the San Francisco Chronicle. Threw some shade at his ex-girlfriend, Kamala Harris, today. or yesterday rather, it's a Saturday column, he basically said that none of the Democrats, including Senator Harris, has the gravitas to beat Donald Trump in the 2020 election. Quote, make no mistake, President Trump's State of the Union address was the kickoff for his 2020 re-election campaign, and so far I've yet to see a Democrat who can beat him. The overnight polling after the speech showed that once again, he connected with voters, at least enough voters to make him a 2020 favorite. You can't say the same for the Democratic contenders. They all have impressive credentials, Brown writes, winning personalities and positive messages, but none displays the people personality that our media-savvy president has mastered, end quote. Brown is right. Like him or don't. But Donald Trump connects with the people in the way that none of the candidates on the Democratic side have shown the ability to do. Certainly none of the Republicans in the 2016 campaign were able to do. Saw a similar story by a columnist for the Chicago Sun-Times a couple of years ago. Traveled down to southern Illinois, to Granite City, where President Trump attended the reopening of the U.S. Steel mill at Granite City that had been shuttered for a while. Left Granite City almost a ghost town that had really fallen on hard times. By firing it up again, U.S. Steel was putting people back to work. And this columnist for the Sun-Times, who identified as a progressive, was there, saw the president's speech, and saw the way the steel workers responded to him. And this columnist, and he caught a lot of flack for this from people saying, you're a sellout. Well, no, he was just being honest and saying, look, he generates a level of excitement amongst his supporters and amongst everyday people that you just don't see from anyone on the Democratic side. So we shall see. President, of course, State of the Union address. If you saw it, you saw what I saw. And surprisingly, CBS News and CNN both came back showing that their viewers who watched the speech, acknowledging that probably more of the president's supporters actually watched it than Democrats. But even so, 76% of the viewers who watched the speech approved of the message, came back with a positive result. Now, compare that with President Obama's last State of the Union in 2016. 55%. 55% approval. Now, non-scientific poll, bearing in mind that you're kind of self-selecting the sample because a lot of people chose not to watch the State of the Union, but still, President Trump delivered a winning speech on Tuesday night. And then on Thursday, he reiterated his message at the National Prayer Breakfast, talking to a group of evangelicals saying, I will never let you down. I can say that, never. To me, the highlight, one of the highlights, there were quite a few at the State of the Union address, but one of the highlights Tuesday night was when he said, all children born and unborn are made in the holy image of God. Amen to that. The Pope and the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar University, which is the oldest and most respected Sunni educational institution in the world, signed a declaration of fraternity this past week in front of a global audience of religious leaders from Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and other faiths. Document pledges that the Vatican and Al-Azhar will work together to fight extremism. That's all well and good. I just note the Islamic practice of taqiyya, which was promoted by Muhammad, which basically means, lie until you're in a position of strength when you don't need to lie about your true intentions anymore. So it would be great if we can find a way to strengthen the sects within Islam that don't take the Quran and Muhammad's teachings literally. Because there are some. But how do we do that? And finally, a disturbing story. I won't go into details here because it's too much to get into in this program. We could do a whole couple of hours on it. But the Houston Chronicle and San Antonio Express News, and I bring this up as a follow-up because the Vatican and Pope Francis has had a rough time recently. He's fighting a rebellion inside the Vatican. And new revelations, it seems, almost every month of child sex abuse. But just as a reminder that this happens everywhere, the Houston Chronicle and San Antonio Express News conducting an investigation going back about 10 years found more than 250 people who worked for or volunteered in Southern Baptist churches that have been charged with sex crimes. 380 Southern Baptist church leaders and volunteers have faced allegations of sexual misconduct. This includes those who were convicted, credibly accused, and successfully sued, and those who confessed or resigned. More than 700 victims revealed by this investigation, and sadly, many of them not treated well by their churches, many of them shunned, abandoned to rebuild their lives. Some urged to forgive the leaders because doing otherwise would tear the church apart, and others urged to abort the children created as a result of these cases of abuse. Again, it's available online if you want to search for it, the Houston Chronicle and the San Antonio Express News. But the enemy seeks to destroy from within. And sadly, it is a problem not just in the Roman Catholic Church, but among Protestant churches as well. Well, we move on to the interview segment. A fascinating story ahead from the streets of Los Angeles to a television set and full-time ministry. Mando de la Vega joins us next on A View from the Bunker.
For thousands of years, the world has heard warning that there is a coming day when the man of sin, the Antichrist, will arise to pilot the greatest deception in human history. Prepare yourself now for what is ahead with the coming Third Temple Collection. This incredible assortment features Dr. Thomas Horn's new book, The Rabbis, Donald Trump, and the Top Secret Plan to Build the Third Temple, where you'll learn why many believe President Trump is a King Cyrus-like figure, guided by Hashem, God himself. The connection between Donald Trump, rabbis, and a behind-the-scenes scheme to erect the Third Temple, and how this, as the book of Daniel prophesied, will be the catalyst that precedes the apocalypse and arrival of Antichrist. All this and so much more. This unbelievable collection also includes best-selling author Carl Gallup's brand new book, The Rabbi, The Secret Message and the Identity of Messiah, which reveals how Israel's most venerated Orthodox rabbi, Yitzhak Kaduri, came face-to-face with the true Messiah and said that it was Jesus Christ. You may know that much of the story, but now you can learn what's happened since. Discover the secrets, witness tampering, intimidation tactics, global media, and powerful personalities who will stop at nothing, including death threats and even ritualistic curses to cover up this new stunning revelation. But we're just getting started. The coming Third Temple Collection also includes Shelley Neese's new book, The Copper Scroll Project, that highlights the decades-long quest to uncover Qumran's greatest secrets, the lost treasures of the Jerusalem Temple. Hold on to your hats as you'll also discover how the Dead Sea Scrolls were merely the tip of the archaeological iceberg as Jim Barfield's Copper Scroll Project tethers to Israel's modern battle for the Temple Mount, and how the secrets contained in the Copper Scroll, the most enigmatic of the Dead Sea Scrolls, might hold the key to one of the greatest treasures in Israel's history. But that's not all. You'll also receive the best of the first annual Blessed Hope Prophecy Conference on DVD. This 2-disc DVD collection is jam-packed with over 11 hours of mind-boggling revelations from presenters like Dr. Thomas Horn on deep state saboteurs and the secret destiny of America, Sharon Gilbert on the return of the ancients through pharmakia, necromancy, and virtual reality, Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis on the inside war against President Trump by elite secret societies, and unforgettable presentations from celebrated theologian Dr. Michael Lake, Derek P. Gilbert, Josh Peck, and more. Also included in this amazing collection, the original 4-week investigative Skywatch television series regarding the coming Third Temple on DVD, featuring Carl Gallups, Shelley Neese, and Dr. Thomas Horn. Sold separately, these items hold a retail value of $180. Yours now for your donation of only $30 plus shipping and handling. Now's your chance to save big. The coming Third Temple Collection, available now at Skywatch TV Store. Order online or call 844-750-4985.
Driving the internet to think This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Coming up in our final segment tonight after 8:30 Central Time, we'll talk about why Mary Poppins is racist. It's just another example of eliminating our history instead of learning from it. That's how we make this a socially just society, apparently. Well, honored to bring to the program tonight a gentleman that we've come to know over the last few years of being here in the Ozarks. His life could have been very, very different than the way it has turned out to be. Started down the path of becoming a gangster in Los Angeles and one of the most notorious Latino gangs in the city of Angels. But instead of respect, power, and money, he found the lifestyle brought crime, guns, and a good chance of early death. But something changed, and now he's the executive vice president of television production and co-host of The Jim Bakker Show. It is our honor to welcome Mando de la Vega to A View from the Bunker. Mondo, welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Derek, thank you so much for having me on tonight. I am so honored, and man, I don't even know what to say right now. I've known you for several years now, and I come to respect you even more every single time I see you. And just to get the invitation to be with you on, View from the Bunker is special to me.
Well, you're very gracious because your life is one I think a lot of people, when they see you on television and see somebody who speaks openly and boldly about the gospel of Jesus Christ, really don't know what path led to where you are today. The folks who see you on television on the Jim Bakker Show each day. You know me well enough now. We basically see each other when we come down to visit you, but I know you're really busy because you guys wear a lot of hats there, as we do at Skywatch TV. You're also a parent, a husband, and our daughter is 28, so she's out of the house. We just have the dachshund to worry about. So I don't have the kind of demands on my time that you do. So I'm honored you could cut out some time in your schedule for this tonight. But where you are today, based on where you started from, as I understand it, and I don't know your backstory, which is why I'm glad we have this opportunity to talk. It appears to me, just from reading your bio at the Jim Bakker Show website, that you could have wound up in a very different position than where you are right now. Where did you start from? What was all of this about street gangs in Los Angeles?
Absolutely. To even get the opportunity to sit next to one of the pioneers of Christian television, it's a miracle for me, because when I was growing up in East LA, California, by the time you hit 18 years old, you're either in prison or 6 feet on the ground. And growing up in East LA, I didn't have much of a road to look ahead to. They told me that my time was going to be short, and I was trying to do everything I could to live up to a fast life. And growing up, I started at about 8 years old. I got introduced to the gangster lifestyle, and that's all I knew. Every Latino kid that is growing up in the projects or in the neighborhood has only one option at that time, and that option was to either join the gangs or to join the gangs. There was really not much of a choice. And you know what? I thought that my destiny was going to be to end up 6 feet on the ground the way I was living my life. I didn't have no role models. My father had walked away. My mother's marriage with my father fell apart. We come from Central America. My mother was born in Los Angeles. And so she brought us back to California. And I was immediately introduced to a lifestyle that I wasn't used to. And I'm going to tell you what, people don't give you a choice. And when you don't have a choice but to respond to what you have around you, you pretty much come to face with death every single day of your life. And I didn't realize that I was going to live this long. And I always remind myself every single day that a person like myself was not supposed to make it this far. Society did not make it easy for me to make it this far. And the fact that I made it this far is a miracle and a testament that there's hope for anyone that is questioning the faith, anyone that is questioning where they are today. Because at one point in my life, I realized that, do I have a destiny? And I started asking questions. Is this it? Is this gangster lifestyle? Is this what life is all about? Is this what my destiny was supposed to be? Was I born for this? I had a lot of questions growing up, and I sit back today having a family, being next to Jim Bakker on the show, and I'm thinking every single day of myself, man, God had a destiny before I even knew him, before he even decided to put me on this earth. I was chosen. And every single day of my life, I don't take it for granted anymore. I realize that everyone's story has a miracle inside of it. The fact that we could have been broken, the fact that we could have died in the middle of this journey called life, somehow God had it in his destiny to fulfill a mission in our lives. And sometimes all you have to do is take one step back and realize what a miracle your story is. Everyone has a story, but if you just stop for 1 second to realize that there's a mission for your life, that you have a destiny, then things in your life starts to make sense where you are today.
Most of the young men that you knew growing up in Los Angeles probably wound up in very different circumstances than where you are today. So what was it that made the difference for you? What was it that set you on a different path from where most who start out where you started wind up?
You know, Derek, 23 years ago on a Saturday night, well, actually, it started in the morning, my sister walked into my life and began to challenge me. And in a way that I'd never been challenged before by anybody. People were afraid to step into our world to even let us know that there was hope. People were afraid of us because of the way we look, the way we talk, the way we carried ourselves. And the atmosphere really didn't allow for anybody to step into our world and challenge us with words that can probably change our lives. And that morning, my sister said 3 things that changed my life. Till this day, I will never forget it. She said 3 of the most powerful things that really started the journey to where I am today. The first thing she said was this: what if God is real? I didn't believe in God. I didn't care about God. I didn't care about church. I didn't care about things in religion or faith. I had lost my faith when my father walked away when I was a kid. And when my father walked away, I felt like everything in life walked away. It felt like the very purpose that I was born for was taken away from me. So I lost faith in God when I was 7 years old. So I started in a path trying to figure out, why would someone put me on this earth, and why would they walk away from me? Number 2, she said, what if prayer works? The last time I had prayed was when I was at a Catholic school at 6 years old, asking God to fulfill my dreams to become a famous soccer player. I was born with an ability to play soccer. So that was the last time I prayed, until my sister walked into my life and asked me, what if prayer works? And then number 3 was this one, was probably the biggest thing. What if you have a different destiny? Those 3 statements changed everything about me, because that evening, we were supposed to go do a drive-by shooting to make a statement to regain territory from some of our biggest enemies, which at that time was MS-13, and which is unbelievable because MS-13 has become to be in everyone's conversation when it comes to security in our country. But I knew of MS-13 since I was a little boy, and we went to war with them. So I knew what type of people this MS-13 have become today. Well, that evening, that Saturday evening, 5 of my homeboys or my friends got in a car. And my sister that morning said, I just want you to come and hear this man that is going to be giving his testimony, and I want you to come and listen to him. And I said, you know what? I don't got time for that. I'm not into that. And if I get caught being inside of a church, there goes my reputation. I can't afford to lose the reputation that I had built in East LA for a little bit of church service that was going to ruin that. Well, I made her a promise that I was going to stop by anyways and put everything on the line because I wanted to rebuild my relationship with my sister and my family. So little did I know that at that moment, when I got inside of that vehicle, everything was going to change. My homeboys knew that I was down for everything that the gang had provided for us at that moment. I had a motto. You know, every good business has a motto, right? And my motto to get guys and girls to be captivated with the gangster lifestyle was, we live to die and we die to live for the gang. So that made a big impact. That gave purpose to young men and women to either live for something or to die for something. So when I got inside of that vehicle that Saturday night with my homeboys, we were getting ready to go do this drive-by. And I told them, please stop the vehicle. I didn't say it that way, but I'm going to clean it up for your show. I said, you better stop the vehicle, homeboy. I got to go take care of some business. I made a promise to my sister that I was going to go see her and pick me up in an hour and we can go take care of this hit. And my homeboy said, no, homeboy, you got to stay in the car. We got to take care of this. We got to do it right now. Well, they respected me so much because I earned my respect in the neighborhood. They stopped the car, and that was the last time I ever saw them. 23 years later, I never heard from them. I never got a letter from them. The only thing I knew that night someone had, ratted them out, and they got set up, and they ended up doing life in prison.
Oh, wow.
And when I got out of that vehicle, I showed up to this church service that I've never been to before. And I stood all the way in the back with a bandana on, with my Lokes, which is my dark glasses on, with Dickies, white T-shirt, and 2 9mm in my pocket. And I said, if anybody recognizes me here, I'm going to shoot him because I can't let anybody know that I'm weak. Well, that night changed everything for me because that pastor, that evangelist, began to preach about a Jesus that I've never heard before. The other side of Jesus that normally they don't preach in church anymore. The Jesus that will step out and meet us where we are. The Jesus that was not afraid to be identified with broken people, with bruised people, with someone with a reputation. So that night, I made a decision to receive Christ for the first time in my life. I had never been scared. The last time I was scared, I told you earlier, was when my father walked away. But when my father walked away, my heart became so hardened that I wasn't afraid to die anymore. I wasn't afraid to be in front of a judge anymore. I wasn't afraid to be in front of an enemy's territory so they can kill me. But that night, it was the first time that I felt fear of what if I don't fulfill the purpose that I was born to do in this life. At that moment, I realized that I had a bigger purpose. I had a bigger destiny than the streets offered me. Now, you got to realize something. I was the shot caller for the gang, for that clique and that gang in East L.A. So my respect that I had earned, the money, the troubles that I got into, everything was on the line to realize, why am I going to believe on something that I don't see, something that may not even be real at the end of the day, but I'm going to take a chance because for the first time in my life, I felt peace. And that night that I walked into that church service started because that girl walked into my world and told me 3 of the most powerful statements. What if God is real? What if prayer works? And what if you have a different destiny?
We're talking with Mando de la Vega on A View from the Bunker. It sounds like the anger of your father's leaving just kind of, maybe I'm playing amateur psychoanalyst here, but it sounds like it almost made it easier to decide to die than the choice to actually live. I mean, actually living was scarier than the destiny that you were choosing for yourself. Was like, well, one of these days I'm going to catch a bullet, but I don't care.
You know what happened, Derek, is that when a father walks away, the identity of your kids walk away with them. And at that moment, I didn't know who I was. I created someone that I didn't even know in order to protect my feelings and my emotions. We used to have a saying in the streets, the weakness of a warrior was love and compassion. So you can't have love and compassion and function in the streets because either you get them or they're going to come and get you. And the fear of someone knowing that there was an empty hole, an empty question, wondering, what did I do that my father walked away from me? You got to understand something. The last words I heard my father say was, I don't want them anymore. So that created a question. Am I not good enough for my father? Did I not play good enough soccer for him? Did I not clean the house good enough? Was I not good enough in school? So that left an identity crisis in my life that I began to chase after a ghost, trying to figure out if someone can identify me. So what happened in that moment, that the gangs came in with semi-good intention, because every Latino kid or every African-American kid that grows up in the inner city without a father is looking for someone to identify them so they can function and fulfill their destiny and their purpose in their life. So the anger that I felt was not so much towards my father, but was more about, am I not good enough in this world for someone to recognize the gift inside of me? So I ended up trying to prove myself to my homeboys, to my neighborhood, to the city of Los Angeles, to find out if someone can see that I have a bigger destiny than what the streets were offering. So the anger almost drove me to the place of insanity, because I walked into enemies' territories just for them to kill me so they can end my misery. I didn't get hooked on drugs. Now, I distributed a lot of drugs and made a lot of money with drugs, but I never got addicted to drugs because I didn't want the drugs to control me, because I just didn't want to end up like a junkie like a lot of my homeboys did and not function in the streets. So the passion to asking the question drove me to stay alive. It's almost like the thought of suicide kept me alive. You know, and I wanted to figure out, what did life have to offer? Is it more than the parties? Did life have to offer more than just money? It wasn't money I was looking for. It wasn't, hanging out with girls and getting my respect in the neighborhood. It was, can someone identify what I was born to do? Because if someone can do it, I will give my life to it.
That's really not a message that's popular in our culture right now. I mean, one of the common threads among some of these really horrific multiple shootings that have taken place in the country over the last, 20 years or so, school shootings, the horrible shooting that took place at the country music concert in Las Vegas, the Pulse nightclub shooting, is that the perpetrators, in almost every single case, were from a home where there was no father figure present. But that's not a message that our culture wants to deal with. We sometimes they'll touch on, okay, maybe there was some antidepressants involved, and maybe that is some aspect. But no, they never want to touch that aspect, the importance of a father in the family.
The problem I've seen throughout the years is that we don't celebrate fathers when they stay. We curse them when they leave. We damn them when, can I say that word? I'm sorry.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
We damn them to almost to fail, because when Father's Day comes along, what do? We get him a tie. We get him socks. We don't celebrate our fathers anymore. We don't bless them. We don't recognize them when they stay with their families. And that's why I'm a big champion for fathers today, because I want to be an example that no matter how hard marriage gets, you don't just walk away. You have to find an answer to try to figure out, how can you stay even through the turmoil? You don't walk away, because the moment you walk away from your family, the moment you walk away from your children's life, you're taking their identity with you. And it's a father's job to identify a manhood or womanhood for their kids. And therefore, in the inner city, we don't like to recognize the father. When you look at the programs that are going on right now, like welfare, the reason why welfare is so big in the inner city is because they tell the mothers, do not recognize the father. If you recognize the father, you will not get a check. Therefore, you don't see the father present. Even though they're there, they want to get involved. But the government has made it so impossible for fathers to be recognized today that they're pushed out of the picture. in order for mothers to be able to get their checks every month, a father has to be absent. So when a father is absent in the home, the father is going to eventually be absent from their lives, and therefore you have the problems that you see today. The Bible says that there will be a terrible time in the last day. Well, what are terrible? What is the meaning of terrible? Serious, shocking, unspeakable, dreadful times in these days that we're living. So when a father is absent, you better believe you're going to have a serious time. It's going to be shocking for kids not to recognize what a father looks like, what a father smells like, what a father sounds like. How does a father carry himself? Therefore, how do we even recognize a father when he's in a home if we don't know what he looks like or he smells like if he doesn't stay long enough?
This again is an area that is not really popular with the way our culture is organized today. With the message that we see in media, the message that we get from academia is that fathers are, we're an unnecessary accessory. And they're working towards a day when men are not even part of the process of creating children. Just go to a lab and you can, just order up whatever you want from the bank there and just go take care of the child yourself and not bring a man into the situation at all. When men are portrayed in pop culture, sitcoms or even television commercials, men are usually portrayed as juvenile, infantile, sub-adult, and it's reinforcing this idea that fathers are not only not necessary, that men in general are just a kind of a useless appendage. What was the famous line? Was it, I forget, it was Betty Friedan or Helen Gurley Brown said, women need men like a fish need a bicycle. That's the message that's being pushed on us, and yet that it runs completely counter to the plan that God laid out for the human family. Men and women, one man, one woman, and training up our children in the way they should go.
Absolutely. That's why I believe we have the moral responsibility to keep men accountable. I think men need to find other men that can be accountable to, so they can not break in the middle of a fight or walk away when life gets tough. Men have lost accountability with one another. Therefore, you rarely see men in public places with their family nowadays. That's why we're easy targets, because we have allowed the culture to tell us what a father should look like. We have allowed the culture to tell us what a man should look like, what a man should smell like. And when you allow the culture to dictate what men should look like and be like and carry themselves like, that's when you start having problems of re-identifying what a man is. So to try to figure out who we are in this day and age, we as the church have to take the moral responsibility to redefine who we are in the community, who we are in the family, who we are in the public place. If we don't do it, then the culture is going to tell us what to do.
Mando de la Vega is our guest on A View from the Bunker tonight. From the streets of Los Angeles to a television set, daily television ministry, is co-host of The Jim Bakker Show. How do we make the gospel more appealing to men? Men have been leaving the church in droves for a long, long time. How do we preach a muscular gospel that appeals to men, whether they're coming from the streets of Los Angeles or, in Mondo's case, how do you witness to professional wrestlers? We'll talk about that as A View from the Bunker continues on this Sunday night. I'm Derek Gilbert. A new take on the prophesied war of Gog and Magog. Forget about Russia coming from the uttermost parts of the north. The enemy foreseen by the prophet Ezekiel is so much bigger and so much older. It's Last Clash of the Titans by Derek P. Gilbert, a #1 new release in Amazon's Christian history category. Last Clash of the Titans breaks down step by step how Greek mythology grew out of Canaanite religion, why the old gods of the Greeks, the Titans, were the Watchers who descended on the summit of Mount Hermon, and why the Titans will return from the abyss for one final battle against God, Armageddon. Last Clash of the Titans, backed up by peer-reviewed academic research. Tom Horn calls this book stunning. Last Clash of the Titans, the second coming of Hercules, Leviathan, and the prophesied war between Jesus Christ and the gods of antiquity. Get it as part of a special offer at skywatchtvstore.com and available now in paperback and as a Kindle ebook at amazon.com. Talking the Walk live every Sunday night. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Next week we talk about archaeology and adventures in archaeology. The hosts and producers of a new film called Footsteps of Lost Truth, Qumran to Petra. Aaron Judkins and Ty Towers join us next week. That's Sunday, February 17th on A View from the Bunker Live. We resume or continue our conversation with the Executive Vice President of Television Production, co-host of the Jim Bakker Show, Mondo de la Vega. Mondo, I'm guessing that as somebody coming off the streets of East L.A., that the gentle Jesus or the namby-pamby, everything is all good, he's all, love Jesus that we often see in American churches today probably wouldn't have appealed to you. Is that a fair guess?
Absolutely. I've heard that message a long time ago, and it was it wasn't that popular as it is today. But the soft Jesus and come and have a pizza party with him would not work back in the day with where I came from. I needed someone to be truthful, someone that can step into the neighborhood and serve the community, but also be confident. They had to be confident knowing who they were, who were they serving. And a lot of people, they go to church today, but they don't necessarily believe what they're hearing today. Therefore, in my opinion, I may be criticized for this, but it won't be the first time. People have become weak and soft when it comes to believing something that they're willing to die for.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would absolutely agree. Yeah.
And it becomes so non-relevant to today's culture. Therefore, people are living a life of Christianity that is mediocre. They're great Christians on Sunday, but from Monday through Saturday, they don't win people to the Lord. They don't serve their community. I believe that the church today has to go back to what Jesus came to do. He said, I came to serve, not to be served. You know what I mean? And for me, when he said, I came to serve, not for someone to serve me, we got that backwards. Today, the church wants to be served instead of serving the community, instead of serving one another. People today in the church don't even know the definition of what it is to serve anymore. And when my sister walked into my world, she walked in with a heart of a servant, with a heart that knowing that who she was in the Spirit of God. And that kind of gospel doesn't exist today. People are afraid because of their political stance or because of the soft gospel that is being preached at their churches today. I'm surprised because I've traveled around the country, and most churches today, which breaks my heart, don't have altar calls no more. Mm-hmm. They don't even allow you to preach the blood of Jesus anymore. As a matter of fact, they don't even allow you to preach the crucifixion that forgives of sin. They don't allow you to do that anymore. And when I was, when I was introduced to the gospel, it was all about altar calls. It was all about come and repent of your sins, and they preached the crucifixion, and it was something different than what we're having today. And I understand the message of grace. Don't get me wrong. I needed grace. But you know what? At the same time, you can't water down the gospel just so your church can fit in with the culture anymore. Because today, preachers are not respected the where they were 20 years ago. Today, preachers, the church, when someone brings it up, it has a different tone now. Back in the day, when the pastor or the priest used to come by, we had so much respect. We will, not curse. We will hide our cigarettes. We had that much reverence towards them. Today, you know what? You can smoke in front of the pastor. The pastor doesn't even say anything no more. You can curse in front of the pastor. The pastor probably cursing with them, making jokes and laughing. And no one has the agony like they did 20 years ago. That's the difference. When was the last time the Sunday school teacher wept and cried in agony for the students in that class? You don't see that anymore. And that's what breaks my heart today, is that the church has to go back to servanthood, has to go back and be confident, has to go back and understand that we fear not. We have to know who we are in Christ so we can be different from the culture. We can love the culture. We can have grace towards the culture. But, man, you have to be courageous enough to tell people around your inner circles that you're a God-fearing man and that you're willing to be a father. You're willing to be a man of God or a woman of God in order to be different. It starts by, my opinion, by serving.
Mm. And I think you're right. It's not just, even here in the Ozarks where, you see a lot of the fellows around in the Ozarks here. There's a lot of facial hair here in the Ozarks, Mando. You and me, compared to some of the fellows that we see just as we travel around here in the Ozarks, we're a little deficient in the facial hair category. And I was raised in a lot different world. You know me well enough to know that I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to. My upbringing, and I wasn't a whole lot different 40 years ago. Give me a good book and just leave me alone. As that was my upbringing. Going out on the streets, no, that wasn't happening. In fact, Mom and Dad got us out of Chicago as soon as we could. Before I even got halfway through high school. So I have a lot different life experience, which is why I wanted to bring you on the program. But just being around people here, and praise God for the last 10 years or so, I've lived in smaller communities and now in a rural area where I've come to realize that this is where the salt of the earth is, not in the cities. But the guys who live out here in the Ozarks, who love to hunt and fish, and the fellow up the road who raises cattle, and the folks on the other side from us who volunteer firemen. I mean, these are guys who get their hands dirty. I mean, that's not the way I was raised. I mean, I'm digging into books and old dusty academic papers and stuff. That's my calling, and those are my gifts. But I can see that a Jesus who was, again, kind of this namby-pamby, it's all good, we don't want to offend anyone, and everything is good, God loves you just the way you are. Well, yeah, he does love us. He loved us enough to die for us. But the message wasn't, it's all good. The message was, look, the part of the gospel that we never seem to hear, that I never heard until I was in my 30s, Mondo. I never heard the blood preached until I got into my 30s, growing up in church every week in mainstream denominations. Okay, it wasn't until we started going to Baptist and Assemblies of God and other churches with a little more spirit in them that I started hearing about the blood of Christ and why we needed salvation. I mean, until that point, it was always like Jesus is sort of a cosmic life coach,
Yeah.
Jesus is my boyfriend. Jesus, teaches you how to be healthy, wealthy, and wise, how to live your best life today, that kind of thing. And the guys that deal with life where it's real, I mean, like your upbringing, where death was part of your upbringing. I mean, not for me in the little protected bubble that I was in with my mom and dad, and God bless them for it. But it's that kind of namby-pamby Jesus doesn't speak to somebody who sees life and death like even a farmer who deals with cattle and livestock and that kind of thing. It just seems to me that you can't relate to a Jesus like that, and the church, as you say, needs to get back to that. We need to get back to the basics here. Why did Jesus have to die on the cross? It wasn't, as the Pope said, a tragedy. It was necessary.
That's it. And I think that's a reminder for everyone that has a tough background, anyone that is a farmer, that anyone that grows up in Chicago, in the streets of East LA, whether they're here, they're fishermen. At the end of the day, this is the bottom line. What reached my heart, Mr. Derek, is that we don't want people preaching at us anymore. We don't want preachers standing up or people standing up with bullhorns reminding us of our sin. It's time for people to have a conversation today. And you have to stop long enough to have a conversation with the farmer to find out where he lives in life. You have to stop long enough to be able to have the courage to step into their world and have a conversation. And that begins the gift that Jesus says to have, to serve. You have to learn how to serve with conversation. I don't like the Christians that have an agenda and they're trying to win you over so they can be recognized on Sunday morning with their congregation and mark another point. I don't want a Christian to fool me into something that they've never took time to have a conversation with me. And I think today, if you're going to reach somebody that has a tough background, whether it be a construction worker, whether it be a truck driver, whether it be a kid from East LA that is in gangs and distributing drugs, or here in the middle of Missouri where, life is tough as it is, just being in Missouri because, the payments of your house is you can't even meet them because they're not paying good enough at work. So you have to find other ways to supply the need. You have to learn how to have a conversation with somebody before you start preaching at them, before you start selling your gospel to them. It's time for us to get to know one another. The Bible says that love is patient. I don't understand why Christians today feel like they have to defend the gospel when the gospel defends itself the moment you have a conversation.
Amen.
I think that the moment we become Jesus with skin on is the moment that the conversation changes.
Yeah. Amen.
Again, taking time, being patient with one another. Who in the world said we're supposed to be in a hurry? No one. But you have to stop long enough to get to know people. I think that was the difference between Jesus of then and Jesus today, is that today we want a fast Jesus, a soundbite Jesus. We want a microwave Jesus. Therefore, our services have to be bigger and shorter. We have to have dynamic lights. And I love all that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against it. But you can't build a relationship with someone in 30 minutes and expect them to change all of a sudden.
Yeah.
You have to build relationship with the community. You have to get to know them each and every single day. You have to meet their needs. You have to meet people where they are today. And your only job as a Christian is to serve them. And with servanthood comes love, compassion, patience, repentance. When people start to know the difference between you and the next Christian next to you, they will know who's real and who's not. And I think that's what happened to me, is that I began to walk around with people that were real. That's why when I met Jim Bakker, a lot of people ask me, how did you meet Jim Bakker? How did that happen? When I met Jim Bakker was a broken man, a man that was not even recognizable anymore to the public because he had been beat up by his brethren, by his own kind. And when I met him, I met a man that was walking in his fullness of being real. He is the epitome of forgiveness. He's a walking forgiven man. And he began to teach me not only to forgive, but how to forgive from your heart. And when I met him, I began to see people all around him that were prophesying that they were Christians and whatnot, but said, well, I hate Jim Bakker. I don't like that man. How can you hate and love on the same sentence? I never understood that. But I realized when Jim Bakker's reaction was, forgive them, love them. And I said, Jim, how can you allow people to treat you that way? Because we have to love them. We have to love them until they learn how to forgive. And the only way to do that is you have to build relationships. You have to build the kind of gift around you of learning what it is to serve. And man, I'm going to tell you something. I began to walk with Jim for almost 21 years now. And I've never seen this man strike back when someone comes against him. He has taught me to forgive unconditionally from my heart. He has taught me to love and be patient. The reason why I sit on that show every single day is because Jim Bakker saw a gift inside of me, and it took time to develop. When the time was right, Jim said, I want you to be on my show. I want you to co-host my show. I believe you have a message. I believe that you and I can work together. And the reason why I sit there is because 20-some years of being trained and mentored by a man that not only speaks faith, not only, preaches forgiveness, but he walks it.
Mando de la Vega is our guest on A View from the Bunker, co-host of the Jim Bakker Show. Mando, I'm glad you brought that up because that was a question I was going to work to and get to. So you kind of anticipated where I wanted to go, because I did want to cover that before we got to this point. The first time I was invited to speak at Morningside, which is in one of the evening segments, and I just felt led to share the only thing that I knew about Jim Bakker before we came down here to Missouri was that, I knew that, Tom Horn had become friends with Jim, but when I was in secular broadcasting back in the 80s, which is how I got started on all of this and learned how to talk into a can, was what I'd heard in the mainstream media about his very public humiliation. And I believed it because the mainstream media said it, and I was part of the mainstream media, and so, must be true. So I was a little nervous when we came down there the first time, and having met Jim and Lori, and then you and Ricky and Tammy Sue and the rest of the family, I didn't know what to expect, but it certainly wasn't what I would have guessed. He, as you say, is one of the most genuine people that I've met, who admits publicly and has admitted for years that he was wrong.
Yeah.
But if, just hearing some of the stories that we've heard behind the scenes about what happened back in the 80s, if anybody had grounds to be bitter, it would be Jim Bakker. And, I've not seen, as you say, that desire to lash out or try to exact his revenge now that he's back on television. And it seems that, the enemy still wants to keep him in sights, in its sights.
The perception that people have towards Jim is one that the media puts out there. Mm-hmm. When I met Jim in 1997, I believe it was 1997, he was touring because his book "I Was Wrong" came out. Mm-hmm. I was in Europe, and I came back, and I was working at the Dream Center in Los Angeles. Matthew Barnett is the pastor there. Wonderful ministry there that serves the community. And he was asked to come and speak there, and I was asked to pick him up from the airport. I didn't know who Jim Bakker was. I didn't know what his background was. All I knew is that this man had been in prison for something that he was accused of. And when I picked him up, he was a very shy man. He would not look at you in your eye. Mm-hmm. He was wearing a hat. He was very timid. He was very shy. He was scared. I've never seen anybody that scared in my life. And I've seen men with guns in their faces, but I've never seen the look that Jim Bakker had at that moment I met him. He was afraid of people. He was afraid of Christians. And that night, I will never forget the message that Jim Bakker brought to that congregation. He preached a message called, "God can still use broken dreams." And in the middle of his sermon, he was so nervous. In the middle of his sermon, he asked, "How many of you in this congregation have been in prison?" Well, 90% of the congregation had been in prison. And I realized at that moment that Jim's demeanor changed. He felt at home. The next day, they were giving Jim a tour of the Dream Center, as they did every big name preacher that came along there, and they had about 15 people around him. And I snuck around and I put my arm around Jim and I said, "Jim, I love you, man." And that was the beginning of our friendship. I realized he asked me this. He says, "I want you to read my book. And after you read my book, you can decide to be my friend if you want to. Many people have decided not to be my friend." He said, "I didn't lose any friends, Mando. I just found out who they were."
Right.
And I looked at him. I said, "Mr. Bakker," I said, "you are my friend before I read your book, and you will always be my friend after I read your book." I said, "I love you, and I have much respect for someone that has the guts to get back up." The next day, I drove him to Larry King, and I realized, wow, this man had become a voice to a generation at one time, and he fell all the way down. If for someone to fall all the way down and to get back up deserves respect, deserves to be heard once again. Today, 21 years later, our friendship has lasted this long. my faithfulness to him, my faithfulness to the ministry. I've been a missionary to the ministry for 21 years, and I've never seen Jim Bakker lash out at anyone at any moment. He says, let God deal with it. Our job is to love our brothers unconditionally. And he goes back to the Word of God. He says, love doesn't allow the other person to know that they've done something wrong. Love covers a multitude of mistakes, multitude of sins. And I began to realize that Jim was an unusual personality because he had every right to lash out. He had every right to defend himself. But you know what? It's not about that. It's about recognizing that God has called us to forgiveness from our heart. If you can't forgive the one person that hurts you from your heart, you're going to have the most miserable time on this earth. You'll never be happy. And for those that are listening to me right now and you're having a very difficult time forgiving someone that has hurt you, it's not about them. It's about you. You know, my mentor, Gary Smalley, used to say to me, you can't control the feelings of other people and their reactions, but you can control how you feel and how you react towards them. At that moment, I realized that forgiveness starts with me. No matter what they do to me, no matter how they react to me, no matter what they've done to me, forgiveness starts from your heart. That's the beginning that when I started to see Jim Bakker serving every single day at the Dream Center, he didn't ask to have a pulpit. He said, I want to move into the Dream Center and live there in one room, and I want to serve the community. You know where your people start to get healed, Derek, is when they start serving others. When they get out of their own misery and they begin to serve other people, that's where they find their healing. And when I saw Jim serve Los Angeles, the community of Los Angeles, for 2 years, every single day, I realized that his gifting began to shift to the unbutton, meaning that the calling that God had given him from the beginning of his life never left him. All of a sudden, he was having Bible studies every single day. About 300 to 400 people will show up to this Bible study to listen to the words of a man that had been broken, but listen to a man that through his journey got to know Jesus in an intimate way. And when I met Jim, I began to know Jesus in an intimate way like I'd never seen before or felt in my life, because Jim challenged me to read the Word of God. In order to survive in ministry, you have to be able to understand the trials and tribulations that life will bring you.
Yeah. Powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. And, wow.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's not a popular message today.
No,
it's not a popular message because it doesn't bring crowds. But I'm going to tell you something. For those that are listening right now, and there's a lot of people that are hearing me right now, that you're having a very difficult time forgiving someone. You're having a difficult time getting past the hurt. And you're trying to figure out, how do I get past this? I don't need medication. I don't need another drink. I don't need a gun in my head to try to end my life, to try to figure out what the answer is. The answer is, it's in your hands. It's in your heart. You start forgiving someone that's hurt you so bad. I'm telling you, that's why when I told you that the thought of suicide kept me alive in the streets, but I had to learn how to forgive myself. I had to learn how to forgive my father. I had to learn how to forgive my mother. I had to learn how to forgive those that came against me. And the moment I released that is the moment that I began to understand what real peace was going to be like.
Wow. Well, Mando, we just got about 5-6 minutes left, and again, I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule here. I just want to shift gears at the end because you told me and Joe Horn a story when we were down at Morningside last time that I just want to get out
Yes.
here, and because I think this is a hoot. Joe is a professional wrestling fan. In fact, he's made contact with a pro wrestler, who I won't name yet because I'm not sure this is confirmed yet, but I think we've got him booked later this year on Skywatch TV. I was a big pro wrestling fan as a kid.
Where are you? Me too.
Yeah, as an adult in my early 20s, a friend of mine and I got, when the glory days of the WWF, we were fans of that just because it's like soap opera in spandex is really what it is. But, it was a great show, and we could laugh at it and whatnot. But you had the opportunity to get to know some of these fellas and actually witness this. How did that come about? And tell the story about how you shared the gospel with one of the most popular wrestlers of the last 30, 40 years.
Listen, I got to be in inner circles that I never thought in my life I was going to be involved in. I got to meet Ted DiBiase, one of my favorites growing up.
The Million Dollar
Snake
Man,
Roberts, Shawn Michaels and Roddy Piper. And, I idolized those guys, man, Mm-hmm. And one night I was in New York. A friend of mine was having an event. And there was a lot of people, man, And we were in this bar, and they were signing autographs. And I was in the corner, being kind of like a bodyguard for what was going on there. And I wasn't assigned to anybody. I was just part of the atmosphere. But I realized, being with Jim, and Jim, attracts a lot of people and signs autographs and take pictures everywhere he goes. I knew the signs when Jim wanted to get out of that inner circle.
Now, Jim
was uncomfortable. Jim Bakker.
Okay.
And then, so I knew the signs of, it's time to get him out of there. And I was in New York City at this wrestling event, and they were introducing this wrestler into the Hall of Fame, and he was signing autographs, and it was getting so wild that I read the signs, and I grabbed this man, and I said, Mr. Piper, he was Roddy Piper. I said, Mr. Piper, do you need me to take you out of this room? He says, please get me out of this room. I'm about to die. I can't take it anymore. I'm all of a sudden, I'm walking Mr. Roddy Piper out of the room, and I begin to walk out with him and get him away from all the public and all the crowd. And all of a sudden, I find myself talking to him, one-on-one, and he starts to ask me questions. And I began to tell him my story of redemption. And at that very second, he asked me, can you pray with me?
Wow.
My man, I could not tell you what an unbelievable moment was for me to pray the Lord's Prayer and to pray him into salvation in that elevator in New York City, and him accepting Jesus Christ into his heart. Now, this was Roddy Piper, man.
When would this have been? About 1 year. What year was this?
Oh my Lord! I think this was about somewhere in the 2000s.
Okay.
And not too far ago, and not too far along. And all of a sudden, the next morning, I wake up. He's having breakfast, and he says, "I want to thank you because for the first time in my life, I feel like I have a purpose."
Huh.
It was the most unreal moment at that moment for me, because here's someone that we all grew up idolizing, and we thought that their life was perfect. We thought that everything in their life was put together. And he said, man, I'm struggling with alcohol. I'm struggling with so much in my life. I don't know if I'm going to make it. He goes, I am so tired. I'm so broken. I don't even know where I belong today. He says, but last night when you prayed with me, he said it was the first time I felt peace in my heart, and I felt like a sense of belonging. That, man, it was a powerful statement, because if I would have been afraid to share the gospel with him, that moment would never exist. Mm-hmm. That's why I believe that the moment that God creates for each and every single one of us is the moment to serve, the moment to be able to be available to those that, whether they're famous or not famous, it's not being afraid to walk into someone's world and reminding them that God is real. What if prayer works? And the big one, what if you have a different destiny? And so that moment with Roddy Piper was an unbelievable moment that I will never forget. And several years later, I think he passed away.
Yeah.
But I believe in my heart that this man made truce with Jesus Christ.
Mando, I don't want to say that you're sort of like Queen Esther here, but the Bible study that Sharon and I produce on Sundays, we've been going through the book of Esther, and Mordecai said something that I've read through the Bible before, and there are times when you're just reading to make sure you get your quota done because you're on a 90-day reading plan or read the Bible in a year plan or whatever, and you skip over some things or they don't sink in. But Mordecai said something to, in a message that was passed to Esther, said, look, if you don't go before the king, even though you could die for breaking the law, if he doesn't want you there in his throne room, God will find some other way to save our people, but you and your father's family will be destroyed. I mean, God's going to achieve his purposes, whether you do it or not. But how do you know that you weren't put in that particular place at that particular moment for such a time as this? That's where the phrase comes from, for such a time as Esther. Okay, you're the queen, and you've got the king's favor right now, but don't think you're going to survive this if you don't do this. Yes, you might be destroyed. You might be killed if you do this. But if you don't, God will find some other person to achieve his purposes.
Amen.
His will be done.
I believe that anybody, and I want you to hear me real clearly, God does not choose the qualified. He would love to use them, but the problem with those that are qualified, that they're not available. Their schedules are too filled up with so much agendas that God can't get to them. But God will always use the broken, the unqualified, the one that doesn't feel like they fit in. Those are the ones that most of the time God is looking for, so God in his glory can be glorified. And man, I was just so glad I was able to be used. I don't care anymore if I'm the man or if people are cheering me on. I'm just glad I can get to wear the jersey in the team. You know what I mean?
Amen. Amen. The only one you got to worry about being the man to is your wife and your children.
That's it. We have a responsibility to show up and become man, even when it's hard, even when you make mistakes. At the end of the day, they're counting on us.
There's a line in a television program that Sharon and I watch, and we don't necessarily recommend it for theology because it's at times it's violent. And this is the television series Fargo. Which is based on the film. They've got three seasons of that show out there. But there's one scene where a police officer, played by Patrick Wilson, the actor Patrick Wilson, is talking to a woman in the backseat of his patrol car whose husband has been killed because he was trying to protect her. She made a serious mistake, wouldn't admit to it, got them involved in a violent situation, and this husband wound up dying because he was trying to protect his wife. And the police officer said, it's like that story in Greek mythology with the guy who keeps pushing the rock up the hill every day, and every day it rolls back down, and we push the rock back up the hill. And then he says, but you know what? As men, it's our privilege. It's our privilege. That's what we do. And, that's just one of those things where you can take something that may have just been put in the story because the writer thought, okay, this makes a cool point. But when you extract it and say, you know what, there's truth in that. There's truth in that. We as men scripturally are called to love our wives, which the Bible doesn't command wives to love husbands, just respect and honor. But we are called to love in the way Jesus loved the church, which is sacrificially as servants, which comes back to your point.
Absolutely. I think the wording there is when you get to.
Yeah.
When you change your vocabulary to, I have to go home or I have to be. No, you get to.
That's right.
And I grew up, I know we don't have much time, but man, I grew up not wanting to get married. I grew up, I didn't want any kids in my life. I knew I was afraid to even be a father, to be a husband. And when I met my wife, Beth, she taught me what it was to honor a woman. For the first time in my life, someone took time to explain to me how to honor a woman. And I said, this is the kind of person I want to marry. And then I told her on my first date, I said, I'm not going to get married. I'm not going to have kids, and I'm not going to get married to a Mexican girl. And here I am. I'm married to a Mexican girl, and we have two beautiful twins. And they are teaching me every single day I get to be a father to these two beautiful twins. The other night, I've always wanted someone to teach me how to play chess, and no one ever took the time to teach me how to play chess. And guess what happened the other night? My son took time to teach me how to play chess.
Oh, cool.
And every other night, he's teaching me more tricks and teaching me that I get to spend time with them.
Yeah.
I get to come home with them. Whether I'm a good father or not that day, I get to be loved by them. And when you realize that you have the opportunity to get to be a husband, get to be a father, the greatest gift at the end of the day is for someone to love you unconditionally. But more than that, to recognize that you don't have to be there. You get to be there.
Amen. Can't think of a better way to conclude. Mando de la Vega is the Executive Vice President of Television Production, co-host of The Jim Bakker Show, and a daddy.
A daddy, yes.
It's like Johnny Cash said, "What do you want on your tombstone?" And he said, he was a good daddy.
Oh, yeah. I hope that is in my tombstone.
All right. Well, brother, we look forward to seeing you again soon. We'll have to do this again because I really enjoyed this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and it is an honor to be with you tonight.
All right. Hang on the line. We'll say goodbye here in just a moment. And View from the Bunker continues after this as we talk about the exploding toilet on the space station and why Mary Poppins is racist. Yeah, her too. That's straight ahead as A View from the Bunker continues this Sunday night. I'm Derek Gilbert.
Jack the Ripper's dark deeds actually began long before 1888. And it wasn't a mere man who committed the crimes, but a demon in league with devilish men, a group of men called Red Wing. Only one small group of valiant men and women stand against this evil, a group that place their faith in Christ alone, and they protect a secret of blood that Red Wing hopes to use to usher in the reign of Antichrist and the end of day.
Red Wing is called Red Wing because they want to kill the church. They want to forever stop Christ from coming back. So it's the Holy Spirit, the dove, with a murdered, has been slain, a wounded dove. Ultimately, we still have to remember that the one who is in control is God Almighty, and we have to go to Him, and we have to suit up every time we go out.
The Red Wing Saga by Sharon K. Gilbert.
Book 1.
Blood Lies.
Book 2.
Blood Rights.
Book 3.
The Blood is the Life.
Book 4.
Realms of Stone.
And coming soon, Book 5.
Realms of Fire. Available at SkywatchTVStore.com and paperback and Kindle at Amazon.com. Characters you'll love and a story you can't put down. The Red Wing Saga by Sharon K. Gilbert.
For thousands of years, mankind has debated how creation began. Ancient texts tell us the story. But today, the real message behind the pivotal account of the Garden of Eden has been obfuscated and lost. That is, until now. World-renowned author Carl Gallups digs up the hidden truths from the book of Genesis to finally give back the knowledge that was lost to the world. Find out what really happened in the Garden of Eden, what Jesus taught about Eden on the cross, and how the conflict between Jesus and the gods of antiquity is about to erupt on planet Earth, fulfilling biblical prophecy. In the new book, Gods of Ground Zero, this explains everything.
Shall we begin?
Let's begin
now. One man, one microphone, and a deep-seated desire to tell the world what he thinks. This is A View from the Bunker, live on Sunday night. I'm Derek Gilbert. Next week, we talk to a couple of men who made a travel-logumentary. In fact, they may have invented a whole new category of documentary film. Sharon and I are going to steal that title, a travel-logumentary called Footsteps of Lost Truth, Qumran to Petra. Aaron Judkins, who's been a guest on this program previously, and Ty Taurus. We will talk to them next Sunday night. That's February 17th here on A View from the Bunker. Well, as I said during the discussion with Mando, I really didn't know what to expect when we went down to Morningside that first time, other than, Tom Horn had become friends with Jim Bakker, and we trust Tom's judgment. But I do know that every time we go down there, there is some pushback. We, are happy to be guests down there at Morningside. Sharon and I, honored to have been guests on the Jim Bakker program recently. Sharon, in fact, a guest on Lori's new program called Life with Lori, which you can find at the PTLnetwork.com or on their Fire Stick, the Amazon Fire app. They've also got a Roku channel. And Sharon, essentially the first in-studio guest for Life with Lori. And some really powerful stuff. In fact, the most recent program, which just went up this past week, Sharon's prayer was powerful. But still, every time we go down there, there's a little bit of pushback from folks who remember what the media broadcast about Jim Bakker 30 years ago. And Mando makes a really good point. If we Christians are not willing to forgive, then what's the point? It's like that joke. You had one job, and you couldn't even do that. We're commanded in Scripture to forgive so that our Father in heaven will forgive us. And when you've got somebody out there like Jim Bakker who has publicly admitted that he was wrong and is now preaching the gospel as clearly as anybody out there on television, what more do you need? So we are honored to call them friends and to be a part of the extended family, which is how they make us feel every time we go down there. Well, there are some interesting things. This last segment of the program, and A View from the Bunker, always time to throw in some of the odder things that I find of interest. Less political stuff, although this kind of still falls into that category. We're in a time now in Western civilization where there are certain things that must not be said and must not have been said even in the past at any point, because it is wrong think and must be stricken from the record. I mean, one classic example right now, of course, is what Governor Northam of Virginia is going through. Not that even in 1984, blackface was a good idea, but when you're young and stupid, you do things. Well, Mary Poppins, one of the more popular family films for generations now, in spite of, God bless him, Dick Van Dyke's really bad Cockney accent, just a family classic. But you got to recognize that the film was produced more than 50 years ago, 1964, and the book on which Mary Poppins was based was written in the 1930s. So there are things that were considered acceptable 80 years ago that are not so much today. Things that were considered acceptable 50 years ago that are not so much today. Well, Mary Poppins now, according to a review written in the New York Times, is racist and should be stricken from the record. Why? Well, because in the film, there's a musical number featuring Dick Van Dyke's character, Bert the Chimney Sweep, called Step in Time. And during this number, the sweep and Julie Andrews and some of the other characters get somewhat dirty, which is, what happens when you're a chimney sweep. You get covered with soot. And according to this critic, it looks kind of like blackface. And so Mary Poppins is racist. Now, there are some scenes in the novels, when you go back 80 years or more, that do use some racial caricatures, which are not acceptable, which should not really have been acceptable then. The phrase in one of the novels, you black heathen, another one using the word Hottentot, which is a reference to black South Africans, an ethnic slur, which is so old that, I had to look it up. I thought Hottentot was, is that a German social club or something? I didn't know. But even though those slurs, those terms were intended to perpetuate racial stereotypes 80 years ago, which not acceptable, not right. We're not trying to justify them. I think we've gone too far in the other direction in trying to just eliminate things like this. Eliminating classic literature like Mark Twain, because of the use of certain words that are not acceptable in modern society. Look, if we forget where we came from, we will never be able to correct the course of where we're going. Of course, the most obvious example of this is the destruction of any symbol of the American South that predates World War I. We cannot forget where we came from. Not everything that this country has done, not everything that we've stood for, is good and noble and true and loving and embodiment of what we want this country to be. But if we flush it down the memory hole, how do we avoid going back in that direction? We can't pretend that we never held slaves in this country. We can't pretend that we never engaged in racial stereotypes. But when we're examining and analyzing and critiquing classic literature, we cannot throw out those babies with the bathwater. Don't justify the racial stereotypes. Don't embrace them as somehow okay because, well, that's just how people thought in the 1930s or the 1860s or the 1780s. But don't vilify the framers of the Constitution, the founders of the nation, because horror of horrors, they were men and women who lived in that culture and were part of that culture in that day. So, anyway, this just struck me as extreme. She got soot on her face, Mary Poppins, and so therefore the movie is racist because it's sort of like blackface. Not really. Contrary to what we've been taught here on planet Earth, which is that the Earth is about to overrun its carrying capacity, which is something that we've been warned about for over 150 years. Remember when I was in high school on the debate team, we were always using Thomas Malthus as a potential, what do we call him, disadvantage? Yeah, when we were the negative team. One of the disadvantages was that we would create the Malthusian nightmare by making the population grow too quickly. Make people too healthy, will overrun the carrying capacity of the Earth, and, Malthus. New projections are that contrary to overrunning the population of the Earth, contrary to the belief that we somehow need to pay for birth control in the third world, because otherwise we're going to have all of these mouths that we can't feed, and we'll need to turn to Soylent Green. Statistically speaking, it appears that the world's population may level out in about 30 years and then start to decline, and possibly decline forever. New book by journalist John Ibbotson and political science Daryl Bricker called Empty Planet argues that the changing outlook of the humans around the planet on reproduction is shifting things more rapidly than statisticians have recognized. We're already, in most of the Northern Hemisphere, not having enough children to maintain our population. And the population is getting older, especially in places like Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore. The aging population is not able to reproduce as quickly because they're aging out of childbearing age, but not even having enough kids to maintain the population. On average, a woman needs to have 2.1 children in order to keep the population stable. And in some places in East Asia, it's like down to 0.8. Here in North America, we're below 2.1, especially among Anglos. So we get to a certain point where the population levels off and begins to drop, and it would take a real shift in the attitude of adults towards having children again to turn that around. I don't know if anyone has actually asked the question of how abortion is playing into this, but I will note that according to statistics, last year, 2018, the number one cause of death on planet Earth was abortion. We may be... It sounds like a trite saying, but it's true. The future belongs to those who care enough to show up for it. And right now, it doesn't look like humanity in general, and the Northern Hemisphere in particular, really cares to show up for the future. And a bit of science news this past week. Russia is saying that the American toilet on the International Space Station exploded last week, spilling gallons of fluid that astronauts had to catch with towels because, no gravity. Sounds like a really bad way to start your day, but makes you wonder if there's more to it than this. The deterioration of relations between Russia and the United States, it has come to this. We're being blamed for the exploding toilet on the space station. Sputnik News, which is, as we've been told all along in this collusion investigation, closely affiliated with the Russian government, said that the toilet in the United States section of the International Space Station malfunctioned. This was a week ago, Friday, actually, spilling water into the microgravity environment. Kind of an important thing because you can't bring new water. You don't just pump water up from the Earth to replenish the drinking water supply on the International Space Station. The filtration systems there recycle everything. And I mean everything. Shower water, sweat, and yes, liquid waste. So the exploding toilet and having to catch the liquid with towels so that it could then be recycled, kind of an important thing. So the International Space Station's been having some trouble. There was a hole that was discovered in the International Space Station over the summer. Russian authorities suggested it might have been sabotage. So, in space, no one can hear you pee. All right, could have had a better punchline there. Anyway, we've got an exciting and very busy year coming up. We've mentioned this a number of times, but the dance card is getting more and more full as we get deeper into the year. Besides the physical conferences that we'll be attending, I'm now part of the Last Days Online Conspiracy Summit, which is now open. This is from Ray and Tracy Gano, which is essentially like having a conference in your home. You bring all the speakers to you with more than 28 hours of exclusive video, free PDF books, 3 of them so far, a $60 value, a resource library worth over more than $100, and a library of MP3 teachings worth more than $250. Your fee also gets you access to a private Facebook group and access to future videos as they're uploaded. Besides the 2 one-hour teachings that I contributed, you've got video teachings from Josh Peck, Troy Anderson, co-author of Trumpocalypse, Alex Newman, Mark Sutherland, our friend from across the pond there in London, Carl Teichribb, excellent researcher whose new book, by the way, Game of Gods, is a must-add for your library. Gary Wayne, author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy. Chris Taylor, a young filmmaker, along with Tom Dunn and Jared Crestman, whose documentary films Detestable and This Is War are very important. You get access to teachings by all of us. As part of this, you'll find the links to the Last Days Online Conspiracy Summit at vftb.net. It's in one of the right-hand columns there. Just click the logo there. That will take you to the sign-in page. And it is, like I said, like having the best of the conference teachings, but in the comfort of your own home. Now, if you can travel, we sure would like to see you in Dallas at the end of March. Sharon and I honored to be a part of the Hear the Watchman conference coming to the Hilton DFW Lakes Conference Center. Sharon has been added as the keynote speaker for Lunch with the Speakers on Saturday. You don't want to miss that. I'll be talking about, I'm going to borrow the title from Tom Dunn and Jared Cressman. Topic of my talk, This is War. I'm going to do some preaching, more preaching than teaching this time. You'll also hear from L.A. Marzulli, Pastor Carl Gallups, Russ Dizdar, Rabbi Zev Parat, Pastor Paul Begley, Dr. Micah Lake, Coach Dave Daubenmeyer, Gary Wayne, Irvin Baxter of M-Time Ministries. And we can save you money on the registration, or if you can't be there, video streaming, video on demand is available. Save $20 off the tickets for the conference itself in Dallas, or 20%, that's $10 off the video on demand. The presentation's available within an hour of the presentation in Dallas. You'll be able to watch it in full HD. And you just need to use the promo code Gilbert20, that's Gilbert20, at the website for sign up, hearthewatchmen.com. Again, use the promo code, get $20 off the registration or 20% off the video on demand at hearthewatchmen.com. Skywatch TV's first annual Defender Conference coming to Branson, the Radisson Hotel, August 2nd through 4th. This is already sold out. This sold out in 5 days. Within a week of the first broadcast about the conference, it's sold out. But that's not surprising, considering that the featured speakers include Tom Horn, Dr. Michael Heiser, Pastor Carl Gallups, Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis, Sharon, me, Josh Peck, Stephen Bankars. And there have been some exciting new speakers added. Shelley Neese, author of the Copper Scroll Project, will be there. Jim Barfield, who's the founder of the Copper Scroll Project, will be there with her. They'll be speaking at the conference. Joel Richardson has been added, and Pastor Jim Bakker. Jim and Lori Baker will be there. Now, if you can't be there, if you didn't get in time to register for the conference, we do have video on demand coming. It'll be the same setup as for Hear the Watchman, essentially, where within an hour of the presentation, you will be able to watch the presentation in full HD. Details are coming this week from Skywatch TV. Just keep watch at defenderconference.com. That's defenderconference.com. And there's also a way where you can get free video streaming if you donate to help Skywatch TV build its new studio. We've got a new building. It's essentially inside a Quonset hut. And I'm not even joking about that, but we got the building for pennies on the dollar. So the new studio, going inside what was at one time a Quonset hut, but we're trying to be good stewards, and that means not going into debt to put a new studio inside of it. For information on how you can get the free video streaming by contributing to Skywatch TV's new studio fund, log on to defenderconference.com. Defenderconference.com. True Legends Conference coming in September. That's the 13th through the 15th of September. The Mansion Theater in Branson. Once again, the theme this year is Answering the Alien Question. Answering the Alien Question. Chase Kletsky, a wonderful lady and respected researcher of the UFO question. L.A. Marzulli, Steve Quayle, Timothy Alberino, and more. Richard Dolan will be back this year, as well as Dr. Hugo DeGaris. And tickets are now available for sale from gen6.com. That's GENSIX.com. Yours truly, honored to be the master of ceremonies? Well, maybe servant of ceremonies is a better way to put it. I get to introduce all the smart people. So for information and to get your tickets, log on to gen6, GENSIX.com. And then the Unsealed Scroll Prophecy Conference. This is a new one in October 4th through the 6th at the Grand Hyatt Hotel in San Antonio. Sharon and I will be speaking along with L.A. Marzulli, Russ Dizdar, Bill Salas, and more. And, oh, by the way, still room on the second bus for our trip to Israel. Jim Barfield of the Copper Scroll Project has agreed to meet us at Qumran and take us on a tour and show us some of the sites where he believes the Copper Scroll points to the burial locations of treasures from Solomon's Temple. For information and to reserve your place, log on to lipkintours.com. That's lipkintours.com. A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House and released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. please leave a review for us on Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever else fine podcasts are sold. You'll find us again on Facebook, Twitter, and now at oneway.com or socialgalactic.com. Our opening theme is Iron Bacon by Kevin MacLeod. His website, incompetech.com. Our announcer is D.C. Good. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.